Hey, welcome back to my channel. So it's been like a minute since I've recorded, and I know we're in kind of a different area today. There's a lot of people home today because I'm still sort of like covering, and so I decided, why don't we just film in the kitchen. I don't really have too many spaces, so this will just have to do. But I'm super excited to be back on here because a lot of people have been asking me about the birth story for the surrogacy birth, and I had the baby it was April 3rd at 8:53 a.m. She was 8 pounds 1 ounces, 21 inches long. She was big for me. I remember when she first came out and I saw her, I was like, whoa. Yeah, I think this video is going to be kind of long because I am going to go over the birth story pretty in depth because a lot of people have been asking, you know, how did it go? And I think at the end I'll sort of put kind of like my thoughts on how the birth went and how the whole kind of journey of the surrogacy went as well. So this video might be a little long, but I do want to say thank you to everybody who's reached out to us, congratulating us and the intended parents for their new baby, and we're very excited for them, and they're really excited as well. I have been pumping for them, and I am going to be giving them milk and hopefully being able to donate extra milk. So my milk is still kind of working its way on coming in, so you know, I bet that's kind of like something too. But overall, like, I feel really great, and it was definitely a really good experience. But let's just get into the actual birth story. We were supposed to be induced we were going to be induced April 1st, but the intended mother didn't want the baby to have an April Fool's birthday, so we ended up changing it to April 2nd. And we were supposed to receive a call at 9 in the morning telling us when to come in for the induction. Now, if you don't know, my two keepers were both home births, so this birth was completely different for all of us because it was at the hospital. So something to note, I guess. 9 in the morning rolls around. We had dropped our two boys off at the grandmother's house, and so we were waiting for this call, and when we ended up getting the call, they said that we couldn't actually come in till closer to noon, call then. And it was kind of frustrating because we were like, wait, what? You know, we thought we were gonna like be able to go in at 9. Everybody was deciding to deliver at that point anyways, but we ended up actually getting a call around 10:30, and they were like, come in at 11:30. So we jumped in the car and drove the hour to the hospital. Once we actually got to the hospital, we checked in and went to our room and started talking to our nurse, Joanne, who was really sweet. She was this older lady, and she sat down and was like, you know, do you guys have any concerns? Like, what is kind of like your birth like outlook and vision? So we kind of talked to her how we were like, you know, we're not really sure if this induction is really needed, but you know, we're here because it's nice to kind of have a date. The baby did have some complications, and that's why we thought we needed the induction, but now we kind of didn't really need it, you know, so we were a little bit like trying to decide what we wanted to do. And she was like, well, let's get the doctor in here and have her check you and see, you know, where we're at. And then we can decide exactly what we want to do for the induction, on how to like start it, if that makes sense. So she checked me, and I was only 2 centimeters dilated and about 50% soft. So I really like had only made the progression of like 1 centimeter since the last time I was checked at my last OB appointment, which I'll link that video up above if you haven't seen it. So that was a little bit kind of discouraging because I was like, you know, like I'm not really that soft. But the doctor was like, well, you know, this is actually a good thing because, you know, now we can start Pitocin. And we were kind of just like, wait, you know, I don't really want to start Pitocin. Like, I want to just start with the gel or like the balloon or something kind of like slower instead of like doing a 0 to 60 type thing. But the doctor kind of assured us if I had taken the gel, it would get me to where I am at the moment. So it was kind of like a pointless thing. So she was like, why don't we just start with the Pitocin, and we'll only, you know, start you at 2 milliliters and up it every half hour. And if, you know, you start contracting really well, we can take you off of it. And I was like, okay, you know, I think that's good. And we had talked to my midwife as well, because I wasn't really sure. At that point, the intended parents were also there. And it was really odd. We actually saw them in the parking lot through our room window. It was like, and they saw us too, and we were like waving. It was really funny. We ended up deciding to go with the Pitocin. And, you know, I got all hooked up, got my IV, you know, like in my arm here, which this is still like kind of tender. So that was like all super different. I also had saline as well, and I've never like I've been in the hospital, but I've never, you know, been hooked up that much, if that makes sense. So that was like all new for me. I changed into my birthing kind of gown. I like brought my own like labor and delivery outfit, so to speak, and you know, got comfortable on the bed, and we started 2 milliliters of Pitocin. But at that point, you know, it was still like la-di-da, laughing and giggling, and you know, we were talking to the intended parents. We decided to do some walking once I was on the Pitocin, and you know, see if that kind of helped start contractions. I was contracting, but there wasn't really much of a pattern. They weren't very strong, so you know, we were trying to do as much stuff to sort of start things going. I was also like bouncing on the ball that they had. After like a half hour, they came in and upped it to 4 milliliters of Pitocin, because the 2 milliliters hadn't really done much. So once I actually was up to 4, I remember being able to feel them a lot more and hoping that they were actually like doing their job. And the intended parents were kind of in and out of the room, since it was sort of like, not like a boring time, but just like not much was going on. So my husband and I were kind of just walking around the hospital, you know, hoping that things would sort of start, and, you know, just talking and just essentially waiting for the baby to arrive. And then the doctor did come in and check me, and I was about 3 or 4 centimeters dilated at that point, and a little softer. I don't remember how soft. I think it was like just a tiny bit, like it really like wasn't that much, but I had dilated more. So the doctor was really kind of adamant about breaking my water. But looking back on that, I really think that it was probably too early to have my water broken. But she was like, you know, we could break your water now, and that would really, you know, engage her head and get her lower and really like push on your cervix, because she was pretty high at that point as well. That was another kind of, not issue, but just a thing that was sort of, she was still really high, and that was kind of why they felt that the Pitocin like wasn't quite, you know, or why the contractions weren't quite working as well, was because she was still so high. So again, I was still on the fence about that, so I had contacted my midwife and asked her what she felt about breaking my water, and she was like, go for it, you know, like might as well just have this baby now. So we ended up breaking the water, which was super odd, because with my 2 boys, my water broke spontaneously, and it was always like a massive pop, where this was just like she hooked it and it was just like this trickle, and it really took essentially forever for it to like actually come out. The intended parents were there for the breaking of the water, but they were waiting outside, and when they came in and my water had broken, you know, everybody was really excited. And we also called my midwife and said, you know, my water's gonna be broken. So she was heading over as well to be our doula. So we were all really excited at that point, because it was like, okay, you know, like things are gonna start going. And I think that they had also taken me off the Pitocin at that point, because my contractions were getting regular, and they felt that things were going to start moving because they had broke my water. After they broke the water, we did more walking, and since I wasn't on the Pitocin, I felt a lot better. I didn't kind of feel so like ill, because I was carrying that, you know, IV thing along. And so my husband and I were walking around. I remember seeing my midwife running, not really running, but she was like kind of jogging down towards us, because she saw us in the hallway. And she was like, okay, you know, like let's get this started. So she like broke out all her essential oils and like doused me with like this calm oil and some lavender on my hips. And then she even did like a fire and ice kind of essential oil. I can't remember what it was called. It literally burned my skin. Like it stung. It was really hot and really cold, but she put it like down my back, and then she also put it on my hips. But it was really helpful because it kind of distracted you from like the pain of the contraction. And literally everybody in the hospital at that point was like coming in because they were like, wow, it smells so good in here. We were like, yeah, you know, it's just some oils. I guess the hospital did have like a lavender restriction or something, but you know, like whatever. Nobody got like a big face or anything. So, and I think at that point we also had a shift change. So we got a new nurse, Vidi, who was really sweet. She was probably like our age. She was phenomenal. I had her throughout the whole rest of the birth, and we absolutely loved her. And she loved essential oils, so it was really great. She was like really happy to be in our room. And I think at that point we were there was only me and like one other woman who was like laboring, so it was really nice that Vidi could just be there with us and you know, concentrate on us the whole time. Once we were kind of like doused in the essential oils, that's when we decided that we were going to do some more walking, because my midwife was like, you need to, you know, really be walking. And like she was kind of like, okay, you can't just be like lightly walking, like you need to be kind of like jogging. So my husband and I went out and we're walking back and forth, you know, in the unit. And the intended parents were kind of in the labor room. They had sort of been giving us some space, which was kind of nice. We were sort of just letting that like naturally kind of, you know, take its course. But they were sort of letting us kind of labor. When I was walking out there, I remember feeling her kind of drop down, and all of a sudden Vidi came running out of our room and was like, oh my goodness, you know, we need to go back into the room. And the baby had a heart decel. So they had me laying on the bed, switching positions. They were trying to kind of figure out like what was going on. And Sarah had kind of thought that it was just from me walking, like maybe her head had kind of engaged. So they were really just like monitoring her for a little while in the bed to see if she was okay. But she ended up being fine. Like her heart rate came back up and she didn't have any other decels after that. And so things kind of quieted down a little bit. So the intended parents went and actually went to bed at that point, because it was later in the day. So this was taking a lot longer than you know, my normal births, which were both under 6 hours. So at that point it had been around 6 hours. So we were kind of like, okay, you know, like maybe we should all get some rest, because if things progress, you know, we'll definitely call you to come in. So the intended parents went to the recovery room and did some sleeping or resting or whatever. Me, my husband, and my midwife Sarah stayed in the room and were just kind of chatting, and I was walking around, you know, not too much because she had sort of had that decel, so we were just kind of lightly laboring, I guess. So the doctor came back in and checked me, and I was still like 4 to 5 centimeters, and I really wasn't soft. So they put me back on Pitocin because, you know, things kind of weren't moving along. So the doctor like really wanted to move things along, and we were sort of like, yeah, you know, why isn't anything moving along? And they started me at 2 and then upped me again at 4, and that's when the contractions like really started getting stronger. But there wasn't really much of a pattern, but they were pretty strong at that point. Vidi also checked me, I think a couple of times, and noticed that the baby was posterior. I think I'm saying that right. Anyways, but her face, she was face up, so she was sunny side, which they thought was why she was having trouble going down and why she was still so high. And I think at one point her head was like turned to the side. So they really had me in all these weird positions trying to get her to move. At one point I was in what they call the running man, where it's essentially you're laying on your side almost completely on your belly, and your leg is like pushed all the way over to the side, kind of like running, or you stay like that for, I don't remember how long, but it was for a while, it felt like. And they were trying to get her to almost be uncomfortable so that she would move her head into the perfect position. But she really like was stuck there. And at that point the contractions were very, very strong, but I really didn't feel like they were doing anything. I remember going through a contraction and thinking, okay, you know, like this is gonna bring her down, like I'm gonna start feeling that feeling of needing to push, and that sort of never came to me, which was frustrating. They did take me off Pitocin at one point, and the contractions were still really strong, but she wasn't moving down very well, and we were still changing different positions. I was on the ball, I was like squatting on the bed. We were really doing everything to try and get her to get in that perfect position. Then because the contractions were just getting more and more intense, trying to get her to move, I ended up being like, you know, let's try the nitrous gas, which I really did want to try. Like, I was interested in that. I'd heard like really good things, and when I got the gas, it was really great, but I also was like really loopy and out of it and pretty crazy, and my husband and my midwife said I was talking about gardening and the dog and just funny things, but I was on the gas for a while, and it did help. It definitely made me feel, it made my lips like tingle and my head kind of feel really odd, but it made me not care about the pain of the contraction, which then kind of made me not care about the contraction. So then I wasn't really able to concentrate on what I needed to do, which was bring her down and, you know, birth her. I think while I was on the gas for a while, I was just like stuck in that kind of 5 to 6 centimeter range, because I wasn't really doing anything because I was distracted from the loopiness of the gas. I definitely think I would have used the gas regardless, but I think too there was also the factor that she just wasn't in the right position. So each strong contraction that I was having like wasn't doing anything because she was stuck. And these contractions were much stronger than the ones that I had had with my boy. Then they did finally check me, and I was only at 5 centimeters, which was really frustrating because I felt like we had been laboring for so long and they were so strong and nothing was kind of happening. The doctor also said she was still like sunny side up, or her head at that point was like turned to the side, like she still wasn't in the right position, and they really couldn't get their hand in there to try and like turn her head, which I remember being like, oh my goodness, like just turn her head, you know, and I'll be able to get her out. But she was really like wedged in such an odd position that you know, they couldn't really do that. So I just kind of kept laboring with gas, and then finally my midwife was like, you know what, we're gonna go off of the gas because I feel like you're not concentrating, things, you know, it's not working. So they ended up taking the gas away, and then I was able to really feel these contractions, and I probably had like 3 or 4 like real contractions without the gas. And I remember being like, nothing's happening, like these aren't doing anything, I'm not doing, you know, I'm so tired, I'm like so exhausted, and like another one of these contractions is still not going to get me to where I need to be to start pushing to get her out. And I was like, I remember thinking, you know, okay, like just try one more contraction, and if it still feels wrong, you know, you should ask for an epidural. And I remember exactly where I was in the room and like what I was doing too when I was thinking about asking for an epidural. And after that one contraction, I was like, nope, like this isn't doing anything, like I'm not progressing at all. And then I was like, I want the epidural, I want it. And once I sort of accepted that, I feel like I was a little bit like, oh, you know, darn, like I asked for an epidural, but I felt better because I was like, I need this help. Like I can't seem to get her in the optimal position. I can't seem to relax enough. The epidural will help me relax, and, you know, I'll get some rest. So everybody was super excited that I asked for the epidural. I remember my husband and my midwife Sarah was like, yes, you know, this is a great idea, you know, and then Vidi came in, our nurse, and was like, okay, the anesthesiologist will be here in 15 minutes. And I was like, 15 minutes? That sounds like 15 hours. And my midwife was like, well, that's like 5 contractions. I was like, 5 contractions? That sounds like a lot. So I was literally waiting and contracting, and it was that was torture. The waiting for him to arrive was torture. And then when he actually did arrive, he literally probably took like 5 minutes to talk to me, but it felt like he took like 5 hours to talk to me about the actual epidural, and like I had to sign some form, and so he had to tell me like, you know, all the risks and the background, and I was just like, when are you gonna stick it in my back, buddy, because I'm in so much pain. And every time I had a contraction, he stopped talking. Like he would just wait, and I would just be like, you know, like, why aren't you doing this? And then when he finally put it in, you know, like Vidi was like, okay, it's not going to be instantaneous. Like you need to wait like 5 or 6 contractions. And I remember being like, what? Like, I don't want to wait, you know? And it was like 5 or 6 contractions, and then they were manageable. I still felt them, which I thought was interesting, but they were more manageable. But then my heart rate skyrocketed and my blood pressure dropped significantly. So they had me on the bed. I had oxygen for a little while. She gave me 2 units, I think, of the epinephrine. Yeah. And so that was like probably the scariest point of the whole birth was then. Everybody was outside of the room except for my husband. So he was in there being my support unit, but Vidi was really great at, I think, like keeping me calm, and even my husband, and just like, you know, trying not to freak out too much. But there was a lot of nurses in the room. I do remember looking over and seeing a lot of the nurses and just sort of like waiting for the kind of hustle and bustle to stop. I didn't feel weird. I just felt like fearful at that moment. Like I didn't notice that, you know, my heart rate was really high, and I think at that point the baby was doing fine. I'm not really sure. I don't really remember like too much of that. But then once, you know, everything kind of leveled out, I think they kept me in the bed for a while after that. Now they did, because I also had to be hooked up to a blood pressure cuff, and it went off every 3 minutes, which was absolutely like annoying. But because I had the epidural, I was able to kind of rest. I still felt the contractions, but I was able to sort of rest. And also my mother, at some point, I forgot to add that, my mother did come in. She drove over to help us because I had asked for her when I was like essentially in so much pain, scrounging for the epidural. So she was there, and my midwife ended up going and resting, and my husband and my mom stayed while I was kind of resting on the bed, laboring. And I'm not sure how long we were resting there, probably for like an hour or 2, maybe even more. It's really the time frame is like hard for me to kind of remember. But they did end up checking me, and I was 7 to 8 centimeters, but fully soft. So the doctor was like, let's start pushing. And that's when we called the intended parents, and we're like, okay, like we're gonna start pushing. And I remember being really relieved that we were pushing, because I was like, okay, you know, like I'll push her in like 3 or 4 pushes and she'll be out. But because of the epidural and because I was so tired, it took 2 hours actually to get her out, because I couldn't feel anything from the epidural. And I was literally so exhausted because I hadn't, you know, we had been up for like a whole day. She was still, I think at that point, like stuck. I think she was still sunny side, or her head was kind of turned, because I was probably pushing for an hour with like absolutely no progress. Like she would kind of come down that first push, but then like go right back up. And that was super frustrating. But everybody was really, you know, like cheering me on the whole time. And the intended parents were kind of like up, you know, here waiting for their baby to arrive. And my midwife and my mother and my husband were both like holding my leg and like helping, you know, with the pushing and all that. I was pushing like flat on my back, which number one was like completely frustrating. And I remember being like, why am I flat on my back? Like this isn't helping. Like I can't even take a dump in this position, like, ugh. But my midwife was really helpful then, because I was having a lot of swelling due to the pushing, because I couldn't feel anything. I was like just not pushing correctly. So she was really helpful with the doctor being like, you know, give her some counter pressure, or, you know, put some ice here. And they had some oil. I remember seeing a lot of oil kind of, you know, floating around. But I just remember feeling super, super tired and defeated at a couple points, because I was like, you know, if I could just feel this, like, she'd be out in like 3 pushes, but I couldn't feel anything, and her head was stuck like right on my pelvic bone. So they kept like trying to kind of get her to move her face. So they ended up turning the epidural off, or down. Yeah, they ended up turning it down twice. They turned it down the first time, I still couldn't feel anything, and then they finally turned it down again, and I was able to feel enough, and she came out in probably like 4 to 6 pushes. I remember the doctor being like, okay, you know, like, she's gonna come out now, so you need to listen to me, you know, in case I tell you to stop pushing or something. And I was like, yeah, So, you know, they're like, okay, push, and I could feel that she was gonna come out if I did, like, you know, a couple extra pushes, because that ring of fire, man, like, I still felt that even with the epidural, which I think is just baffles me, actually. But she was like, okay, stop pushing, and I was like, yeah, no, you're standing right there, and, like, you know, gave it my all, and she finally came out, and they stuck her on my chest here. We did have a towel so that I wouldn't have any skin to skin with her, but I did actually have to kind of hold her with my arm here, because they sort of put her almost like, she kind of almost fell a little bit into my side here, and my intended mother came up, and we were both just like, I don't know, my midwife kind of describes it as like we kind of became this like one thing, and she was just like so ecstatic and started crying, and I was crying, like everybody was, you know, like so emotional. And I remember seeing the baby and looking at her and seeing how big she was and how big her head was, and I being like, oh my goodness, like, that's why, you know, that's why this was so hard, was because she was so much bigger for me. And you know, she cried, and my intended mom was like, I don't know what to do. And I was like, look at your baby, like, touch your baby. And I kind of grabbed her arm and like put her arm on the baby, and the baby was, oddly, now that I think about it, looking actually at her mother. And you know, it was just so sweet. And instantly, like, as she came out, my thought was, you know, I would totally... Okay, sorry, my card just said that it was like full, so I had to go and fix that. But it was worth it, like 100%, because the look on their faces was so surreal and like so special. And the intended mom just was so happy, and she just couldn't stop crying. She like was kissing me on the face, and you know, we were just like talking and just enjoying like this euphoric moment. And we did wait for the umbilical cord to stop pumping, which was for a while, so we were able to sort of enjoy, you know, her first couple of seconds. And then the intended father cut her cord, and mom was able to take her and do skin to skin instantly. And I, you know, just was waiting for the placenta to come out, and the doctor was assessing any of the damage, so to speak. But actually I had minimal tear. It just was like a couple of like 2 or 3 stitches. It was like nothing, which I was super surprised, because her head was so big. It was great. Like, I felt so good afterwards, because I was done, you know, pushing, and because we were, you know, helping this family. And you know, we had no complications afterwards. The baby did spike a fever like a little while after they kind of put her on the heater, and she did have a little bit of complications afterwards with like some vomiting and a little trouble eating, but they had really felt that a lot of that was due to her birth, because it was a rough birth, they felt, for her. A lot of the nurses were super surprised that she was 8 pounds, because they were like, you looked like you were carrying a 7-pound child. Like, it didn't look like she was 8 pounds. And it was funny because, you know, this was an induction. Like, normally I would have waited till she like naturally came on her own, but I'm glad that we didn't wait, because she could have been 9 pounds, and that would have been like even more, you know, rough. And this was a rough labor. Like, I would definitely put it in that category of rough, and it was hard work. It was much slower. It was much more intervention than my other 2 births, but it was still like completely worth it. And my husband actually got to view the birth, where with our boys, you know, he was kind of more behind me, like supporting me, where this time, like, he was taking all the pictures, and, you know, really he got to see the head come out, and like that was a really interesting kind of good moment for him, which I thought was like really neat that he kind of like got to experience that, because like, you know, before he just experienced seeing our kids, where this time like he experienced seeing one actually come out and was like, wow, you know, that's pretty intense. And he got like a ton of pictures for everybody, which was super helpful. You know, everything was smooth after that. We were moved to a different room, and the intended parents and the baby had a different room. They did go up to the NICU for a couple of testing, and because she kind of had some like vomiting stuff, but you know, ultimately like she was fine and I was fine. I did start pumping right away and gave them a little bit of milk, and I still, like, for the life of me couldn't believe that she was 8 pounds. Like when they said 8 pounds, I was like, wait, what? I mean, it made sense, like, because she looked 8, you know, big, but I still was just like, I can't believe it, like, she's 8 pounds, oh my god, you know, ouch, like that's why. That's like pretty much, I mean, like, there's a lot more, but I don't want to make this video like too long, but I do want to kind of put at the end of this video like my thoughts on everything. And I do feel like this was such a worth it journey and situation, and like I would totally do this again. Obviously, like, you know, I am still recovering, so you know, we're gonna take a break from that. I almost don't even have words sometimes when I think about it, because so many people have been like reaching out and are like, you know, I'm so proud of you, like I can't, you know, wrap myself around this, like it's such a special thing that you're doing, and I wish I could do something like this, and you know, like, but I don't like pregnancy, or you know, how are you feeling, like do you feel like you missed the baby, and you know, does it feel weird? And it doesn't, like, I don't miss anything, because there was nothing to miss. Like, she's not mine, she didn't look like me, like I didn't have like that sort of, you know, oh, like they're taking my baby away, like that was not there. Like, if anything, you know, I was more happy that she was going with her parents, because those are her parents, and you know, I feel like the recovery is a lot easier because I don't have a baby. I mean, I am pumping every 3 hours or so, but you know, I don't have a child or like an infant that I have to take care of right now. I am still like trying to make sure that I'm being conscious of, you know, taking things easy, so I'm not like overexerting myself, because I did just, you know, give birth. But ultimately, like, I feel good. I feel proud of myself and my family for supporting me and doing this, and you know, I'm so happy that I was able to help this couple like become a bigger family. And I think about it too, like it was like a 2-year kind of process, because we met when I was still nursing our youngest, and so we had to wait till I was done nursing my youngest, which was almost like 9 months at that point, and then, you know, we had to wait for transfer and all that, and so it really was like a 2-year process, but it was completely worth it. And I would totally do something like this again, and I really want to keep like bringing awareness to surrogacy and IVF and all that type of stuff, and I really want to keep making these types of videos too for you guys, because I do feel like I am getting a big following, and a lot of people do have a lot of questions on stuff, and I do want to make a ton of more videos. Anyways, I don't want to make this video too long, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. I'm gonna try and get out 2 videos a week. Mondays and Thursdays are the days that I've been trying to do, so now I'm hopefully will get back into my schedule. But thank you guys so much for all of your support, and I'll see you in my next video.